Welcome you guys to the very first video in the Bailey's Novelties series. Oh wait, hold on. I don't know if this is tea, but it's my favorite juice, so I'm gonna go with it. I'm spilling tea about books, so it still counts. This is in my glass that I designed, so if y'all know I designed my own little cups. They're so freaking cute and pink. Because I posted last week that I designed this book nook that I'm currently sitting in, which by the way, I'm obsessed with. I have spent every single day literally just sitting in here. If you haven't seen it, you can go watch the video of me like designing this and working with the team to build it. On the video of me designing the book nook, a lot of the comments were all about doing a book haul or what books I put in my book nook or book recommendations. So basically, I'm taking you on a tour of all of these shelves and showing you what books I own and why. Let's get into it. I'm gonna try and section this video so you can see the different like types of genres I'm gonna talk about. Pretty much everyone here should have at least one book that they like or want or some kind of recommendation of some kind. Here's a little reminder of what the book nook looks like in case anyone didn't see the last video. I've got drapes here, the light, the bright window. I also have like what I call my favorites corner over here, other, and then like classics, and then of course the mural on the ceiling with all the fairies. Also, how cute is she? This fairy sits on my favorites shelf right here. First books on the shelf is the Throne of Glass series, which if I had to recommend any series in this library to any of y'all, the number one I would recommend is this series. It is Brooklyn and I's all-time favorite book in the entire world. There is nothing like this entire series. I only pulled the first one down, but there are 8. Counting this one. Brooklyn and I actually have matching tattoos from this series. So we have 2 whatever, and I have it right here on my ribs. She has it on her wrist. That is a quote from this series. My 2-word summary for this series and why I love it so much is that, I'm trying to think of two sentences. The most gut-wrenching, heart-clenching, tear-jerking writing in a wonderfully built fantasy world with a strong feminine lead. The way I wish I could reread this book for the first time, I would literally like give up my pinky toe to do that. The author of that series, Throne of Glass, her name is Sarah J. Maas, and she is one of our favorite authors just because her writing is unparalleled. There is no one that writes like her, and the way she does like plot twists and character development and world building and magic building is crazy. She actually wrote the very popular series, A Court of Thorns and Roses, which if you are a fantasy girly or really on Book Talk at all, you've definitely heard of this one. I personally like Throne of Glass better than Court of Thorns and Roses, which people go back and forth on which one's better. I just think it's what your preference is. Another one with magic, strong female lead, fantasy, just love interests, all that stuff. This is the famous series they call ACOTAR, by the way, on Book Talk. Okay, and this is the last series by Sarah J. Maas that I own. It's called Crescent City. She has written 3 series, Throne of Glass, ACOTAR, and Crescent City, and this one is her newest series. All of these series have smut, although it's not like crazy until you get to the 3rd series, Crescent City. It gets a little bit more heavy on the smut, so just a heads up. It's set in a modern day world, so it's a little different than her other books. Out of the 3 of her series, this one is my least favorite. However, to the whole fantasy world, Sarah's books are my most favorite, if that makes any sense. Up next should come as no shock to anyone that's been on Book Talk. I feel like you'll need to see this on the shelf first. Look at how gorgeous he is. This is so fantasy coded. Like, ugh, are you kidding me? This is a dragon character, could be seen as multiple characters from multiple different books. I tried to put him next to all of the books that had like big dragon characters, so Game of Thrones obviously, and then of course Fourth Wing, which I'll pull down and explain, but I just had to show you because he's so freaking cute. I'm trying to get this to stay upwards. It is more difficult than you would think. Fourth Wing! So if you are a Book Talk girly, a fantasy girly, you for sure have heard of this series. It blew up on TikTok. It is dragons and power and magic and love interest and smut and everything that makes a fantasy book a fantasy book. Right now, the 3rd one is just out, but I think it's supposed to be a 5-book series. So it's not finished yet, but it is so good. I would say this is one of my top series. I'm actually currently reading the 3rd one and it is amazing. Look at how pretty these edges are. This is kind of what also blew the book up, was the dragon sprayed edges. Fun little story, and then I'll stop blabbing. Sometimes I go to Barnes & Noble for like date nights with Asa, and once upon a time I went to Barnes & Noble. I saw the sprayed edges, I saw the dragons, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm gonna like this book, whatever it is. I'd never heard of it. So I just grabbed a book and left Barnes & Noble, ended up reading it and loving it. Like 2 weeks later, it starts blowing up on Book Talk, and everyone wants to get their hands on the dragon painted edges. And of course, as you can imagine, they sold out. No one could find them anywhere. And somehow I just accidentally happened to grab a copy before it became popular. So I have one of the original copies, and let me just say, I am enough of a book girly to know I am never giving this up. It's one of my treasured goods. Okay, next up I have Game of Thrones. I just wanted these to be next to the dragon, but also it's just a classic favorite. I also love the way that these covers look. These covers and the way it's written is so freaking beautiful. But this is just a classic favorite. Like Game of Thrones is just, ooh, it's just good. And there you can see the entirety of the series. It is so freaking cute with all the colors. Beautiful on shelf. Next up in the favorites corner, we have Red Queen. It did become really popular, and Victoria Aveyard became really popular on TikTok. So she still currently is publishing a bunch of different books, but this one is also just a really interesting story. It's a little bit darker of a story, which I really love. I own the whole series. It's in my favorites corner, and they're just pretty. Like, look at that cover. This is the Iron King, but there are 2 series in my life that I feel like are so underrated, and I cannot for the life of me figure out why. If there's any books I want to see just like blow up and be so popular, it's these 2 series. This one is one of them. This is called The Iron King. It's the Iron Fae series. My grandma, every year for Christmas for our entire childhood, would give Brooklyn and I books, and she gifted us these books one year. I'd never heard of them. It is about a girl who discovers that she is Fae and just all the ins and outs of that. It's a typical trope, but it is so good. I can't explain enough how good this series is, and everyone needs to read it. If you are a Fae lover, if you love like a traditional trope, this series is so good. So that rounds out the section of my favorites corner. That covers this whole shelf. I'm gonna go to the next shelf and start the next section of this video. But first I need a little hydration break. So good. Let me change my camera angle. Okay, next up, this is what I call my second favorites. Starting with the Blood of Ash series. I apologize to all my girlies who don't love fantasy. Fantasy is my all-time favorite genre. It's almost all I read. Although I love reading other series and other types of genres, this one is my favorite, always has been, always will be. So Blood and Ash is a really popular fantasy series. It does have an enemies to lovers trope, which we love an enemies to lovers trope. A lot of people recommended it to me, which is how I started reading it, and I'm very glad that I read it. There's also a sister series, and it's called Of Flesh and Fire. I have a few of those books. It follows the same kind of like world building, magic, storytelling, basically just ages before the Blood and Ash series. And I actually liked the Flesh and Fire series more than Blood of Ash. Do with that information what you will, but those are also on this shelf right here. Caraval, however you guys want to say this. Sometimes when you read, you don't pronounce the words out loud, and then I get really self-conscious that I'm pronouncing them wrong or saying people's names wrong. Like, for example, in ACOTAR, you guys say Rhysand. I call Rhysand Rysand. Always have, always will, even though the audiobook says differently. So if I'm saying some of these titles wrong, just let me know. I think it's Caraval or Caravel or however you want to say it. It's a little bit more of like the puzzle piecing it together, kind of. I don't know how else to explain it. It makes you think, and it's beautiful. Like, look at how pretty red pages. It's super cute. And this one has 2, 3, and then like a part book. This one should come as a shock to literally nobody. If you've read fantasy, you've read Cruel Prince. Everyone recommends it. I loved it. I don't know what else to say besides it's amazing. It's on my favorite shelf. It's so good. So I have the whole Cruel Prince series. Okay, this is a more recent and less well-known series that I own called Spark of the Everflame. I loved this series. It's newer, not as like well known as some of the other series I've talked about too. It's a fantasy plotline. It's a very unique plotline I've never read before. Follows again a strong female lead. We're sensing a role here, a theme here, guys. Strong female lead is a common thing amongst all of these books, but seriously, this series is so good, and like the tension between the love interest is just like freaking chef's kiss. The only thing I will say is it is a little bit hard to get into, but then once you get into it, it is so good. And the third book, I think it's the third or fourth book is coming out here pretty soon. So it's not a finished series, but if you're looking for something that kind of competes with ACOTAR, or to read after reading ACOTAR or Throne of Glass or Fourth Wing, this might be your winner. The next series on the shelf is An Ember in the Ashes. It touches a lot of sensitive subjects and like kind of addresses serious subjects while also being like a good read for people, and that's what captured my attention. You can learn a lot. Look at how pretty those sit on the shelf. Like that is a gorgeous setup right there. Dance of Thieves. This one I'd seen so many times on Book Talk, and I was like, meh, I don't know if it's for me. And then I read it and I was like, it is actually for me. It is so good. It's like adventures on top of adventures on top of adventures, and like fun character interpersonal relationships. Just a lot of goodness. I couldn't forget about the Grishaverse. So I have Shadow and Bone. This one is a classic, like classic magic world. If you've never heard of the Grishaverse, that is like the magic world building that this author has built. It also inspired the Netflix show. I think a Netflix show came out on this series. It was pretty good, but you guys know how I feel. Books are always better. If you disagree, let me know. I mentioned earlier in this video that there are two series I feel like are super underrated. I already mentioned one of them. This one is the other one. It's called Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. Outside of Throne of Glass, like Throne of Glass is my favorite writing and storytelling, but this one just holds a special place in my heart because it's the first fantasy book I really ever read that was like, oh my gosh, I love this. It's so different. I've never read a magic like world like this one. The characters and friendships that you read about in this series is not comparable. Chef's kiss times a million. I do not know why this book has not blown up. I will say it is like a YA novel. There are love interests, but there's no like smut or anything. So if you wanted like a teen friendly one that your teen could read, or someone a little bit younger, this one's also friendly in that way, but that does not make it not good, because it is, and it deserves all the hype in the world. Y'all need to go read it, report back. Thank you. That's your homework. Okay, another one on the shelf is These Hollow Vows. This one is just a really cute story. It's an easy read. It's one of those fun ones that you read and you're like, I didn't expect it to be this good. And then I read it and I'm like, oh my gosh, it actually is that good. And it has a second one. I don't think there's a third one. Now I have a confession about the rest of these on this shelf. I put these up here because I anticipate that they will be one of my favorites. However, I have not read this yet. So it is on my list of TBRs. It is like number one on my list as soon as I'm done reading all the other books that I'm reading right now. This is up next. It's called One Dark Window. I've heard nothing but raving reviews about how good it is. So I put it on my favorite shelf. If it doesn't end up being one of my favorites, I'll adjust it somewhere else. But you guys should let me know if you've read this and what you would rank it. And then last but not least, this one is gonna make y'all scream because I have it on my favorite shelf because as a kid, I loved these books. Like as a teen, loved them. I went back and reread them as an adult. It's so bad. Like the writing is it's so bad, but I have such an affinity for like some of my childhood books that I can't not love them. Y'all are gonna scream. Literally, this is gonna cause commotion because this is a very popular Book Talk book. I personally think the writing as an adult doesn't hold up, but as a teen, it totally does. Shatter Me? Listen, I have a love-hate relationship with Shatter Me. I love it because it's nostalgic. I dislike it as an adult because it really doesn't hold up as an adult, but a lot of people love this series. I can already hear the comments coming. I can already hear them coming. Y'all are gonna be freaking out that I don't love it. Sound off in the comments, but that's how I feel. This is like my young adult shelf. I put them up here in case my siblings or someone that's a little bit younger than me wants recommendations. I can come up here and pull any of these from the shelf, which means they are also non-smut friendly. So anyone that doesn't want like smutty scenes, this shelf has all of those for you. First up, The Selection. If you haven't read The Selection, what the crap are you doing? This is a staple. Everyone in the book world needs to have read this. It is literally, think Bachelor, like the show The Bachelor, but make it book. That's this. Cute romance, cute storyline, a little bit of rebellion. It's a must. Next, I have Legend, which is another childhood favorite of mine. I used to love this series. It used to be one of my favorite series ever. It is not really like a fantasy. I'd call it more dystopian, kind of on the same vibes as Divergent. It follows like a dystopian world, follows two characters from different like paralleling parts of their world and how they interact and how they like save their like society. We do have Divergent here, another classic. If you've never heard of it, that's crazy. Divergent is a popular movie series. The movies, in my opinion, were terrible, but the books are not as bad. They're good for YA. As an adult, meh, but as a YA reader, yeah, these are good. The ending, I will say, is probably one of the most untraditional, shocking endings of a series I've ever read still to this day. This one's also a classic, Maze Runner. This is another one that I feel like is friendly for any type of person. Like, it could be fantasy readers, it could be non-fantasy readers, it can go for girls, boys, whoever wants to read this. It's not necessarily like apocalypsy, but kind of apocalypsy. It actually follows a male lead this time. Yeah, this is one of Asa's that he's actually read and loved it. And Daxton also loved it. And these are also, here's the movie. Dylan O'Brien was the star. Next up is Cinder. If you've never heard of Cinder, it is basically a retelling of Cinderella, but in this more like futuristic world where there are some people who are also robots. And this is kind of like a robot person Cinderella-esque figure as the lead. And it is super, super cute. If you read one, you've got to read the other and you're gonna love both. Okay, this next one, I feel kind of the same about this one as I do Shatter Me series, which is, it's a childhood staple. Everyone has heard of it or read it. If you ask me now as like a 25-year-old married adult, it's not necessarily like the best writing you ever heard, but it's a classic called Matched. And this one basically follows like a storyline where in this world, you get matched at a certain age with your future like spouse or partner. You have no say. There's no love in the decision. And it's all about how they deal with that. So I do love the covers. They're like so nostalgic for me. These covers are nostalgia. Like, oh my gosh. I remember as a kid just thinking, those covers are so cool. I've got Fablehaven. If you've never heard of Fablehaven, it is a very good fantasy series following two siblings who discover kind of like a fantasy fairy world in the backyard of this manor that they're staying at. It's kind of complicated to explain. It's got this fun sibling relationship, a little tiny bit of like crushing on someone, but no like smut or anything like that. It's just a really good, solid, cutesy, kiddish fantasy. And there are lots of books in this series too. And then of course, it's not gonna shock anyone, I have the entire Percy Jackson series and the entire Harry Potter. Please, Potter fans, don't scream at me. I didn't mean to say it. Harry Potter series over here, and I actually didn't own them before I built this book nook. I had a set at my parents' house and never replaced it, so I needed to get them. So I bought new versions, but these are classics. Again, Harry Potter movies, Percy Jackson movies. Actually, a lot of these have been turned into movies because they're just like classic YA novels. You wanna know what I don't have on here? Oh my gosh. Guys, I don't have Hunger Games on this shelf. That's not okay. I need Hunger Games on this shelf. That will be remedied. I will be getting Hunger Games and it will be being put on this shelf. That's crazy. I can't believe I forgot that. This is the YA shelf. I have that cute little dragon up there. Everything just fits so perfectly. It makes me so happy the way that it's organized. Next shelf on my book nook wall, I don't know why I lost my words, book nook wall, is kind of, I would say, a miscellaneous. So some of these series, they're not necessarily my most favorite. Some of these series I have not started reading yet, but I know I want to own. Some of these series aren't finished, so it's kind of a miscellaneous. I do want to start with this one. I don't even have the first book, so no one scream at me, but this is the Crave series. First of all, the covers are so gorgeous. Everyone's seen these covers. They're so beautiful. I've heard nothing but good things about this series and I really wanted to own them. So I have a few of them, but I don't have all of them. So if you've read them, let me know if it's worth the read. I have another series called 3 Dark Crowns. This is another one that I picked up on a date night that I thought looked really good and have never read. So again, a lot of these are like on my TBR. For the girlies who aren't readers, you're gonna scream. Look at this book. This is ridiculous. It is probably the largest book that I own. Let me see how many pages this is. 820 pages in this book. And I need to know if it's worth reading all 820 pages. This is one that the girlies on Book Talk scream about. The ones that love it, and anytime there's a big book, I know I'm gonna love it because I love a good, long story, deep, in-depth storytelling. I own both of these. There's a second one too. I need y'all to tell me, did I do good in buying it? Should I read it? Let me know. Guys, I'm literally standing. I've been standing on my thing the whole time I've been pulling my books down. I'm like, hey, just like my window wide open. My neighbors probably think I look crazy. There was a series that I introduced earlier by Victoria Aveyard. I think I'm saying her name right. If I'm not, I'm really sorry. But she's the one that wrote Red Queen. And she also wrote this series called, I think this is the first one, Realmbreaker. I trust the author and I've read stuff by this author. So I have it up here as like on my TBR shelf. I have a series, I believe this is the first one, called These Infinite Threads. Again, this is one, I believe I have read it, but it's been a minute since I've read it. I felt like I really liked it, but I don't remember a lot about the series. So it may be time to reread. Oh, it's here. This is the first one. The Woven Kingdom series, I think I read it a long time ago. Need to reread. That's just the honest truth. Sometimes you don't remember everything about every series that you read, and it may be time for a reread for that one. Another TBR, The Mask of Mirrors. Gorgeous cover. I think that's probably what appealed to me the most. So I have the first and second one on my shelf over here. That is TBR listed. Okay, this one's kind of embarrassing. Not really embarrassing, but kind of embarrassing. Like I said, there's a couple that are on the same page as Shatter Me, and this one is one of them. It's called Hush Hush. It is by no means the best like writing. By no means is it the best fantasy world, but it's just one of those like funny, what do people call them? Romantasy. It's a romance fantasy, like very romance heavy. That's pretty much the like gist of this book and the series in general, but it's a very heavy like romantasy. I just couldn't help but pick it up and read it. It's one of those fun ones. You know, you read it and you're like, hee hee, and then that's it. And that's how I feel, hee hee. I also have the entire Bone Shard series. So this one is another one I started and never finished. I think that I will like it when I have like the right mindset of reading it. It's kind of one of those that I have to like turn that part of my brain on. Like, it's not necessarily fantasy. I think that's why I have a hard time is, yes, it has some kind of magic, but it's not necessarily the typical magic I read in fantasy, and so my brain has to be put on that type of book to read it. So I started at the wrong time and I want to finish it. So if any of y'all have read it, let me know. Another TBR, this one is called The Starless Crown. I think it's more of like a apocalyptic type series, and I love a good like apocalyptic storyline, so I picked these up. I really should have called this the TBR shelf, honestly. That's what I should have called it. Trial of the Sun Queen, another TBR picked up at Target when they had like the buy one get one 50% off, because you know I can't help myself, and this is on my TBR list. Red Rising, finally one that I've actually read on this freaking shelf. This one is very interesting. How do I describe this? Sci-fi, a little bit like reading a story from the perspective of someone who's a sociopath. And I probably ruined it. I probably ruined it. No one's ever gonna read this series. No, it's actually good. It just has the emotions of a robot, but somehow it makes sense for this particular world. I don't know how else to explain it, but the people who ride and die for Red Rising, like really ride and die for Red Rising. Like there's a mega following for this series, so please don't come for me. I didn't say I didn't like it. I did enjoy the read. It's just different. And if you want something different than anything you've ever read and has a male lead and is a little bit like sci-fi-y with like a kind of like a war aspect, this one's for you. The White Hot Kiss. This is written by the same author as From Blood and Ash and the Flesh and Fire series. So I got it because I trust the author's writing, but I have not read them yet. So we are, again, the TBR shelf. That is what we're now deeming this shelf. It's called a TBR shelf now. I'd say this is the least aesthetic shelf because a lot of these aren't finished and it's kind of miscellaneous, but this is my TBR shelf. Yeah, my miscellaneous TBR. The top shelf of my book nook is completely empty. There is one pile of books up at the top and I left it empty because obviously I'm gonna be getting more books and collecting more and I will fill the top shelf. I'm really trying this year to only buy books that I've read and loved so that I don't fill the shelf with like my TBR shelf, which is books I haven't even read yet. So we'll see if I stick to that plan. Up here, the pile of books I do have are kind of a miscellaneous pile again, starting with my childhood faves. These are books that kind of don't fit in any of the other categories that I feel like are so nostalgic. Probably some of my all-time favorites from my childhood, just super, super cute books that I wanted to own for the nostalgia, but also just like good writing. One is called Fairest. It is by Gail Carson Levine. Used to be my favorite author as like a tween. Also wrote Ever, which is this book. Wrote The Two Princesses of Vermar. I think that's how you pronounce that. This is actually one of two. I've literally only ever read two books ever in my entire life, and I've read a lot of books that have twins in it. Zodiac Academy was one of them, and this is the other. And anytime there are twins that are written appropriately like twins, I love it. By that nature alone, just because there's twins in the storyline, it makes me really love it. But then of course, you know, it's also just a cute book. We also have Ella Enchanted, which is by Gail Carson Levine. This is a obviously very famous storyline and a very famous book. Book of a Thousand Days is by Shannon Hale, one of my favorite authors. This one is a beautiful story. The storytelling of Shannon Hale, like, that needs to be studied. Someone needs to study it. Because seriously, she thinks of things no one's ever thought of before, and the fact that it's just not appreciated enough, and it needs to be. And then of course, again, Shannon Hale, The Princess Academy. This one is so good. Take away a learning lesson that everyone needs to have read a Shannon Hale book. And then there are a few randoms, like one of my favorites, The Song of Achilles. This is a beautiful, heartbreaking love story. I don't want to give anything away, but it's about the true story of Achilles and his heel, and it's seriously so beautiful. And then I'm not tall enough to reach them, so I will just show you. These are like the classics with the cute covers. These two are also two really cute books with like fun pages, but these are the classics. You can see Anne of Green Gables, Black Beauty, Little Women, A Little Princess. Fun ones to just have on your shelf. I have tons more that I don't own, so maybe I'll do like a recommendations video or something. And if you guys are loving the book series, please subscribe and let me know, because I want to know, like, do you want more of this? Should I keep it going? Should it be a series regular? Like maybe we do this every year in the month of February. I really appreciate you guys coming and watching this video and just like chatting with my passions with me, because that's what makes the job fun. It's fun. The last thing that I will say is one of the videos that I want to film is me reading y'all's 1-star books. So I need a favor. I need y'all to look at your 1-star books and comment them on this YouTube video. Tell me what the title of the book is, what you rated it, probably a 1-star, and why you rated it a 1-star. And I will be picking like 4 or 5 of those books and your reviews, and I'll show you the review, I'll read what you said, I'll read the book, and then I'll tell you if I agree or not. And I just think that's gonna be a fun like video to film. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for chatting and hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next week for another Bailey's Novelties.